What if the story of Jesus' birth was known long before the star appeared in the sky? What if there were mystics, prophets, and a sacred group who not only anticipated his coming, but prepared for it in silence, waiting for the moment heaven would place a soul like no other into the world? And what if Mary, his mother, was not chosen at random, but was herself a vessel of prophecy, raised and initiated for this divine purpose? According to the Edgar Cayce readings, the life of Jesus did not begin in Bethlehem, and it certainly did not emerge in isolation. It was part of a long, mystical preparation, a divine plan foretold and protected by an ancient brotherhood known as the Essenes, and carried forth by a young woman whose soul had agreed to bear the burden of light. Before we continue, if you've ever felt there is more to the birth of Jesus than tradition reveals, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to House of Spirit. We explore the forgotten mysteries and deeper spiritual truths hidden beneath ancient teachings. Let us now enter the story, not as it is told in churches, but as it was seen by prophets, recorded in spirit, and revealed through the trance readings of Edgar Cayce. According to Cayce, Mary was not just a humble village girl visited by an angel. She was part of a community of spiritual seekers, the Essenes, who lived in anticipation of a Messiah foretold in ancient visions. In reading 57:49-8, Cayce reveals that Mary was dedicated to temple service at the age of 4 and was trained under sacred conditions in preparation for her role. He states, "This was the beginning of those preparations for the coming of the great teacher, and the mother was chosen by the group." This group, the Essenes, were a mystical sect known for their purity, prophetic abilities, and deep commitment to spiritual discipline. Cayce describes them as caretakers of the ancient wisdom, tracing their roots through both Jewish tradition and older Atlantean spiritual lineages. In readings such as 254-109 and 1472-1, he outlines how the Essenes secluded themselves in communities like Qumran and Mount Carmel, practicing rituals of purification, silent prayer, fasting, and attunement to the divine. They were not merely scholars or monks, but clairvoyants and healers who understood the movement of souls between lives and awaited the incarnation of a being who would shift the vibration of earth itself. Mary, then, was selected not only for her lineage, but for the soul within her. Cayce's readings often emphasize that souls choose their incarnations in alignment with karmic and spiritual destiny. Mary's soul had already walked through ages of preparation. She had lived before in ancient sacred lands, including as part of the Egyptian mystery schools. She returned in that lifetime to fulfill a prophecy too vast for words, one known only to the few who still remembered the voice of spirit. According to Cayce's trance readings, the preparation for Jesus' arrival on earth involved not just spiritual readiness, but also astrological and energetic alignments. In reading 5749-2, Cayce reveals that the Essenes were guided by visions, dreams, and celestial observations that pointed to a specific period when the Master of Masters would enter the world. They believed that certain stars, planetary patterns, and soul migrations coincided in divine rhythm, marking the window when this sacred incarnation could occur. Their observations were not guesswork, but part of an advanced spiritual science, remembered from Atlantean times and preserved through Egyptian and Hebrew initiates. Mary, from her earliest years, was immersed in this environment. Raised among priestesses and visionaries, she was taught to meditate, to keep ceremonial purity, and to guard her energy for the day she would receive the greatest of burdens, a soul of light unlike any other. Cayce describes her as being trained in the temple schools of Mount Carmel, under the protection and guidance of women who had themselves been initiates of Egypt and who understood the power of vibration, silence, and sacred thought. These were not passive rituals, but conscious, energetic practices designed to prepare the vessel for divine life. In reading 5749-6, Cayce directly links Mary's temple training to her later ability to receive and nurture the Christ child. He emphasizes that this was not simply biology or miracle. It was preparation, choice, and spiritual alignment. He says, "It was from these sources that there came those activities in which Mary had been trained, and through which the announcement of the angel came. Her ability to hear the angel Gabriel was not a random event. She had been taught to attune her consciousness to higher frequencies so that she could receive divine instruction without fear. Interestingly, Cayce also reveals that Joseph was part of this same Essene order. He was not a confused carpenter shocked by an unexpected pregnancy, but a wise man already spiritually prepared to protect and shelter the soul about to be born. In reading 11:58-9, Cayce describes Joseph as a soul who had walked through many incarnations of testing, and who willingly accepted his role as guardian and earthly father, despite knowing that the child was not his own in the physical sense. So, the conception of Jesus, as Cayce presents it, is not merely about an angelic visit or immaculate conception. It is about an unfolding prophecy, one that began centuries earlier across lifetime, through karmic threads, soul agreements, and sacred teachings preserved in silence. Mary and Joseph were not incidental characters. They were central to a cosmic story, prepared long before their physical births. As the Essenes watched the skies and read the stars, they waited, not for a king of politics, but for a bringer of light. And Mary, silent and pure, waited with them. The Essenes believed that time itself could be sanctified. Each moment of prayer, each breath taken in silence, each ritual performed in alignment with the divine, would shape the unseen pathways for a soul to incarnate with greater clarity and light. According to Cayce, this belief was not symbolic, it was literal. They understood that thoughts and intentions form subtle geometries in the ether, influencing who would be born, when, and into what spiritual climate. Mary's conception of Jesus was preceded by these sacred workings. It wasn't just her physical purity that made her the chosen vessel. It was her inner state, calm, receptive, and aligned with divine will. In reading 57:49-1, Cayce refers to the mystical preparations of the Essenes, explaining that they held frequent gatherings of prayer and fasting with the specific purpose of preparing a channel, a body, through which the Prince of Peace might enter. These gatherings weren't simply devotional, they were intentional acts of spiritual engineering. The angel's announcement, often referred to as the Annunciation, is also viewed differently in the Cayce material. Rather than a sudden isolated visitation, it is seen as a culmination of years of spiritual tuning. Mary, being clairvoyant and deeply attuned, did not respond in confusion or fear, but in a stillness that recognized the voice of divine truth. Cayce explains that such spiritual experiences were familiar to her. He emphasizes that Mary had agreed to this role long before she was born, and the angel's message was a reminder, not a surprise. Cayce's readings suggest that the soul of Jesus, known in spiritual terms as the Logos, had incarnated in previous times to prepare for this final mission. In readings such as 3:64-1 and 20:67-7, Cayce identifies earlier incarnations of the soul that would become Jesus, figures such as Adam, Enoch, Melchizedek, and even Zend, a lesser-known teacher of spiritual law. These were not disconnected lives, but a spiritual evolution, a long arc moving toward the fulfillment of a single cosmic mission, to embody divine consciousness in human form. This understanding of multiple incarnations was not foreign to the Essenes. They accepted reincarnation as part of their spiritual doctrine. Cayce states in reading 57:49-2 that among the Essenes, many were the students and teachers who had returned to the earth for this purpose. They recognized souls by vibration, not merely by birthright, and they knew that Mary and Joseph carried within them the resonance of lifetimes past. So when the moment finally arrived, when Mary conceived by the overshadowing of spirit, as Cayce describes, it was not a rupture in natural law, but the fulfillment of one. It was divine law, working through perfect conditions, shaped by human will, spiritual discipline, and cosmic timing. And in that moment, a prophecy older than memory took form within her. According to Cayce, The moment of birth itself held spiritual significance far beyond what could be seen by the eye. In reading 57:49-6, he describes how the Christ child was born not just into physical form, but into a spiritual atmosphere that had been purified and elevated by years of sacred intention. The Essenes were said to have kept watch in shifts, meditating and praying as the birth approached, maintaining a sacred vibration that would support the safe entrance of such a high soul into matter. The star over Bethlehem, Cayce explains, was not simply a celestial anomaly or planetary conjunction. In 2067-7, he describes it as a manifestation of spiritual energy, visible to those attuned to it, guiding seekers from the east who had also been watching the heavens in their own ancient ways. These were souls from Persia and India, familiar with the prophecies and inner sciences that foretold of a world teacher. The so-called wise men were more than astrologers. They were initiates, part of a global spiritual network aligned with the coming shift in consciousness. Cayce repeatedly insists that the birth of Jesus was a turning point for the earth, not merely in a theological sense, but in terms of the planet's energetic field. He explains that the incarnation of such a soul raised the vibrational threshold of human consciousness. This, in part, is why his teachings continue to resonate through centuries. Their frequency is encoded with a higher spiritual blueprint, one that Cayce claimed could awaken remembrance in the souls of those ready to hear it. Mary's role did not end with conception or birth. She remained a spiritual guardian throughout Jesus' early life, continuing her own inner work while guiding the boy whose soul held the memory of universes. Cayce notes in 57:49-4 that Mary possessed a quiet knowing, and that she often withdrew into silence not from confusion but from reverence. She understood better than any the magnitude of what was unfolding. Interestingly, Cayce also notes that Jesus did not begin his public ministry immediately, nor was his identity fully understood, even by those close to him, until much later. The years of his youth, often called the lost years of Jesus, were not lost at all. They were a continuation of preparation. But throughout this period, Mary remained the anchor. Her presence, Cayce suggests, served as a stabilizing field for the Christ vibration. Through her prayers, silence, and unwavering love, she ensured that the original prophecy remained intact, not just in word, but in vibration. Her life was a living sanctuary, a temple without walls, through which the divine could move unimpeded. In the Cayce readings, Mary is more than a biblical figure. She is portrayed as a soul of immense spiritual maturity, a being who had evolved across lifetimes, preparing to serve in one of the most important roles ever entrusted to a human soul. Her agreement to carry the Christ soul was not coerced nor spontaneous. It was a conscious choice made in harmony with the divine plan. And the Essenes, far from being an obscure religious sect, were caretakers of that plan. They lived in harmony with natural law, cosmic rhythms, and inner revelation, awaiting the moment when the light of the world would walk among men. It is important to understand that for Cayce, prophecy was not about predicting events in a linear timeline. It was about recognizing patterns in the soul's journey, threads of divine intent that could be seen by those attuned to higher realms. The birth of Jesus was one such prophecy, spoken, guarded, and fulfilled not only through divine intervention, but through human cooperation with Spirit. Reading 25:33-8 speaks to this sacred cooperation. Cayce explains that the Christ soul entered the world through a prepared way, and that this preparation was not only spiritual, but energetic. Every soul involved, Mary, Joseph, the Essenes, the wise men, even the animals in the stable, played a role in maintaining the purity of that moment. It was not accidental nor random. It was a cosmic orchestration in which love, law, and light converged. And what does this mean for us today? This story is more than historical reflection. It is a call to remembrance, a reminder that great spiritual change never arrives suddenly. It is born through years of inner work, through patience, devotion, and the quiet preparation of the soul. Just as Mary was prepared in silence, just as the Essenes watched the heavens and whispered the names of the prophets, we too are invited to participate in prophecy, not through fear or spectacle, but through alignment. The story of Jesus' birth, through the lens of Edgar Cayce, is not merely the story of one holy child. It is the unfolding of a divine pattern repeated in all souls who seek the light. Mary's willingness to listen, to believe, and to become a vessel for divine life is echoed in every moment we choose stillness, every time we say yes to something greater than ourselves. So the question is not only what happened 2,000 years ago, the question is, are we listening now? Are we preparing now? Because perhaps, just as Mary knew before he was born, there is something waiting to be born in us too.